So this is the big boy panel. We have a lot of people on stage. I'm just going to introduce Max, though, and you can go ahead and get started after that. Max Harrison-Caldwell is a 1010 enjoyer and staff reporter covering subculture and breaking news at the San Francisco Standard. He is also associate editor at Plank Magazine and a contributing editor at Village Psychic. His writing has been published in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Boston Globe, and Thrasher Magazine, among others. Last year, he showed up late to his own presentation, incredibly hungover, and still managed to pretty much nail it. Folks, Max Harrison-Caldwell.
Thanks, Ryan. And thank you all for coming here today. What's up, everybody? How we all doing? All right. So, does skateboarding need journalism? We're going to talk about that today. Alternate title on the skate media. And first of all, I want to acknowledge the organizers of Pushing Borders Malmo. Some of you were there in 2019. Very fun. They put together the first panel on skate media 5 or 6 years ago now. It was a really great event, big inspiration for this panel. And you might wonder, if there was already a panel on this, why do we need to do it again? So here to... Sorry. Gonna fast forward through all my panelists. Here's why. Let's say Skater X just dropped an amazing part. And I'm like, dude, let's talk about it. And Chris is like, dude, I don't know. What about the allegations and all that other stuff? I'm like, who fucking cares? The dude just dropped an insane part. That's Roger Bagley of the 9 Club speaking to Jenkem in a January interview, perfectly illustrating what is wrong with skate media. Here to discuss these shortcomings and the state of skate media more generally are our wonderful panelists. Natalie Porter is the founder of the Women's Skate History Archive, which celebrates the history of women and non-binary skateboarders. She is a columnist for Closer Skateboarding magazine, and her book, Girl Gangs, Zines, and Power Slides, A History of Badass Women Skateboarders, will be published this September with ECW Press. Templeton Elliott had a short career as a filmer with clips in Mosaic, Yeah Right, and other videos. He was a staff writer at the Skateboard Mag, RIP, for 8 years, and also wrote for the Ride Channel. He has run Mostly Skateboarding, first a blog and now a weekly podcast, since 2005, 2 decades deep in the game. Those familiar with his work may also know him as the Skate GIF King. Willy Staley is a story editor at the New York Times Magazine. That's Templeton. Willy Staley is a story editor at the New York Times Magazine. He has written about skateboarding for the Times Magazine and California Sunday. Jessie Van spent most of the late 90s skating in New York City and San Francisco, and in the early 2000s was a contributing writer for Transworld Skateboarding Business, Slap, and Kingpin Mag. She co-founded Mess Skate Mag with Shari White and Kristen Ebling in 2021. I don't know who this guy is. Gifted Hater is skateboarding's most famous YouTuber and an accidental investigative journalist. Thrasher editor Michael Burnett once called him an insult vlogger. And of course, Cole Nowicki is a Vancouver, British Columbia-based writer and the author of Laser, Quit Smoking, Massage, and Write Down Plus Circle. His work has appeared in Thrasher Magazine, Closer Skateboarding, The Tie, and elsewhere. He writes Simple Magic, a weekly newsletter about skateboarding, the internet, and other means of escape. And I want to give an extra special shout out to our executive director, managing editor, the brains, Mike Munzenrider, who did so much heavy lifting behind the scenes to make this panel possible. We would not be here today without Mike. He's been a mentor to me. He's one of the first other skateboarders I met who is a professional journalist. He's looked at my resume, he's read my cover letters, and he put in a shit ton of hours helping me get ready for this panel, helping all of us get ready for this panel, and he came up with the name. All right, so let's get into it. Cole, you recently wrote about Roger Bagley comments in your newsletter. Can you tell us a little bit about what you said and why?
Yeah. Am I on? We on? Perfect. Yeah, so I'm a blogger. Been blogging for years. I wrote a longish blog about Roger Bagley, and in preparation for today, I was trying to compile my thoughts. I wrote them down, accidentally wrote another blog this morning. So I'm just going to skim through this, essentially talking about what I wrote about and what I think. You should put that quote back on the screen, if you can. What I think the issue with Bagley's perspective here is. Because that's amazing, Roger, bro. Because as you're saying, Max, it is a pretty perfect encapsulation of the issues and sort of self-imposed limitations that the skateboarding media often struggles with. Because if you read Bagley's comments on its face, he comes off as almost aggrieved that he's being asked to do the bare minimum by his podcast colleague, which is to consider whether or not they should share their substantial platform with someone who has serious rumors or allegations swirling around them. And what you can also take from that response, and maybe this is more, maybe I'm inferring a little further into it, but Bagley thinks that skateboarding media should just be about skateboarding, the act of it. The skateboarders doing it perhaps are just avatars for brands. Maybe they're a personality to market, human up until a point, up until serious issues arise. And to be fair to Bagley, he is, at least historically, right. From the outset, skateboarding media has only been about entertainment and product promotion. I mean, Thrasher magazine started as a vehicle to promote independent trucks. It's just, yeah, shout out independent trucks.
This is a deluxe panel.
I'm writing Lurpivs. And you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but when all of skateboarding media is that becomes a problem, because when serious issues arise, those outlets don't cover them, usually because they're afraid of losing advertiser dollars, alienating readers potentially. And I think the underrated aspect to all of this is upsetting folks in an industry that is tight-knit and insular. Hello. I'm a fan. And that means when important, I know I'm talking, but I'm reading the whole blog, thank you. But that means when those important issues arise and don't get talked about, they get pushed to the wayside and they get deemed essentially as unimportant. And for the people who are affected by those issues or are concerned about them, it signals to them that the media and the industry do not care about those issues, or essentially them. And that's a problem. We should give a shit about that stuff. And if we want to have a healthy media ecosystem and an industry and a skateboarding culture, we need to. And that's the end of the blog.
Thanks, Cole. Yeah, and what you're saying about media outlets being afraid of alienating advertisers, even readers, really hits home. But luckily for us, there are some people in skateboarding commentary today who don't care about pissing people off. And one of those people, our very own Gifted Hater, recently made 2 long videos about Chris Cole, one serious and one silly. And so, Joe, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the investigative process of getting all of the records and documents that you got, compiling all of the internet receipts and rumors and trying to make sense of it, what your motivation was and how it went for you.
Yeah, oh my God. So basically, I mean, I did not really want to be the person like that. Like, I started off my YouTube channel by like like looking into the barracks, like why is there a minion, Euro gap, that type of thing. And so like it'd been a long time since the allegations, everything like started bubbling up, and I didn't know really, what to make of it because there was a lot of hazy kind of information, and I didn't want to like contribute to something that didn't feel very productive. But so much time ended up passing where it became like this thing that was like impossible to ignore, and I felt like, if you do have any kind of platform, whatever you use your platform for, it's like, just from a like sort of a moral standpoint, it's like, okay, I feel like I should do, or I should say something about it because, there are other people. I read Cole's blog about it, but it's like, I basically decided to get into contact with Christine. Usually the way I do my stuff is I never contact the people that are involved with anything. I always just like go based off what is publicly available. But I was like, this is like clearly like a totally different situation. So I got into contact with Christine. She sent me tons and tons and tons of information. A lot of it was available on Slap, but a lot of it was not. A lot of it was kind of newer stuff. And basically I just spent like a week putting everything together that I felt was like the most concrete and relevant to her case because, there's a lot of, especially, it's amazing how much evidence she even did have, but there's a...
If I could just interject, sorry. For anyone in the audience who may have been living under a rock, can you tell us what her allegations were, what the situation is with Christine and Chris Cole?
Christine is Chris Cole's ex-wife, and there's a lot of different allegations. Mostly, the ones that I covered are related to domestic violence, over pretty long period of time throughout their marriage, and that's what I stuck to. There's other stuff, but like I said, I stuck to just what I could because when it was something like that feels like a major cultural issue, because I think this, this isn't only in skateboarding, like this is an issue that, and that's why I think that it's been really difficult for people, to cover and to understand, because like you're talking about Roger Bagley, and he's a guy who like, like he's like a, Tim Pool fan or whatever, and it's like you have all these now like hyper extreme people that are influencing anybody who has a cell phone, and so people just get more and more and more divided. And I think Roger Bagley is somebody who's got probably pushed over into a direction that I would imagine is the opposite of most of these people in here. So I just wanted to try to make a case that was understandable and was not making assumptions, and it was just evidence-based because I wanted it to reach the most people that it possibly could, and that was my goal with doing it. And Christine also just like an incredible job of like categorizing, organizing like all of this information. Like she had to go through years and years of like text messages and phone calls, whatever, to make all of this, which I can't imagine how badly that sucked. She did a really amazing job, and I just picked the parts of it that I felt like would be pretty difficult for people to deny, and then I put that out, and then, I did like a joke video after, because the idea was I didn't want to make a joke out of the situation, but I wanted to show like how ridiculous it was that if you have these allegations of domestic violence, that you're going to now go on like some phony, podcast routine with your, your new comedian girlfriend. So, sometimes that's like, I wanted to hit it from both sides, like the, straight to the point side, and then also like sometimes it's equally, if not more effective, to make a joke out of somebody versus treating the situation seriously. So I tried to do both. That was basically what I was trying to do.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned these issues aren't specific to skateboarding. They're also not new, even though it's easier now to follow along discussions of them with the internet, social media. You can read about stuff online, even if you're not talking to the people who are directly involved. But it's important to remember this has been around forever. So, Natalie, can you speak a little bit about a high-profile example of a scandal involving a professional skateboarder from approximately 33 years ago?
My pleasure. First up, I just want to thank the people on this panel, because when men use their privilege, their platform, to call out issues that are not hard, not easy to talk about, like domestic violence, femicide, it really helps, because that emotional labor, it's a lot to inform and educate these sort of sensitive issues. Like, I know Consent is Rad has done an amazing job, Skate Like a Girl, but we need you. So thank you. But yeah, okay, Gator. Oh, this is skateboarding at its ugliest. You know, revered in the 1980s, sort of this privilege on a pedestal, MTV. White male privilege and misogyny at its pinnacle. And when he was finally charged with rape and murder, Jessica Bergstein in 1992, the skateboard industry was silent. Dead silent. There was just no vocal condemnation of his actions, and this meant that like rumors, lies just kind of festered. It meant that people who didn't want to deal with it, they could just be in denial, they could avoid it, or they could just make up shit that didn't happen. And that has consequences. And it sadly, it's kind of a bit of a pattern. Like Ben Pappas, 2007. He was at his peak head-to-head with Tony Hawk back in the day. He also murdered his ex-girlfriend, and the only media real response to it, like there's sensational documentaries, and then The Guardian actually wrote an article, and the only real comment was like, oh, why did he do it? Oh, he did it because he found out she was a prostitute. Fuck that. Like, that's so horrible. Like, that is not justification. Like, a prostitute deserves life. They're a human being. They deserve dignity. And also, like, that's not an excuse. It's also, I believe when I did some digging, like, she had 2 restraining orders against him. She was in college for counseling and addiction. And when you don't humanize these people, like, you can justify just... misogyny. So, sorry, this is heavy, but toxic masculinity can just breed and thrive unless we talk about it. And thank you for doing that.
Natalie Porter, everybody. Let's have a hand. Yeah, and so part of that is, as you say, nobody's reporting on this in the skate press. Nobody's getting those facts out there, even though Gator is a famous pro. Ben Pappas was famous in the vert world. And people know about these people, and would be interested to know what's going on with them. It might impact their support for these pros, right? Even now, to a degree, you still have these guys who want to collect Gator decks, right? But there were magazines back then. At least there were big magazines back then. But over the years, these magazines have gone away. And luckily, there are a whole bunch of wonderful new magazines and mainstream outlets covering skateboarding in their place. Is skate media in a better place now than it was 15 years ago? What did the old mags do well? What did they do poorly? And Natalie, I just want to return to you really quickly. And you can answer first, and then we can go down the line.
Yes, I'm a librarian, and typically, like, I revere the printed word, but I do not have a lot of nostalgia for these older publications. And I'm just going to give you a quick example of sort of before and after the internet. So 1992, pretty heavy year. This could have been a year where the industry like rallied around women, because that year Skaters was released as the first all-girls, all-women video. 14 women, and this is like the culmination of Bonnie Bluen's dream back in 1986 to have like a national women's network, pen pals video. And so it happened, and it was amazing. But 14 women, and there was party, and the industry did not acknowledge this. There was no reviews of the video, and it's just so sad because it was such an opportunity. So it's not just about a lack of representation, it's like missed out on these amazing opportunities to celebrate. And during the 90s, you can imagine that women got pretty mad, riot girls, like we had to go back to square one with like zines. I think of Check It Out, Gunk, Villa Cola, and just start grassroots again, and and DIY all girls skate jam. But then the internet, fabulous. We embraced it. Like, we had our own forums. There's like this forum called The Skulls, where it's like pretty much Australian lesbians, just like, it was so awesome. I love The Skulls. And then, of course, Lisa Whitaker, like, eternally grateful for Lisa. She's accumulating footage of all these amazing women she's meeting, and then she's puts it online with the Girls Skate Network, and there was actually in 2003 there was a little reunion of Villa Cola, and Lisa showed this footage of security guards pinning Alex White, and they watched this, and it was like a catalyst to do the video, Getting Nowhere Faster. They were like, we have to do this. And they did it. And this time, skateboarding media, like, they couldn't ignore it. And Dr. Natalie Williams did a fabulous article in Transworld. And then I believe Scott Pommier at Transworld, he kind of advocated for Lori D. You probably know her artwork. She's also Villa Cola. And Nicole Morgan to have 2 pages in Transworld, just featuring women. It was very creative. It was just beautiful, kind of tucked away in the back. This lasted 5 issues, and then they were told that they needed to sell the 2 pages to advertisers. So first thing that gets cut is like this hint of diversity. It's so sad because it was so beautiful. So that was, I empathize. Magazines have to survive, but I think that's part of the problem. We're here to talk about journalism, is like they do reflect the industry. They have to kind of conform. And so, diversity and representation gets cut, and they're not reflecting the actual community. So, for journalists to thrive, I think you kind of got to be a bit rogue. You can't have these associations with these big companies because, so you got to have integrity, because otherwise, we want to be a counterculture. That means condemning misogyny, genocide, racism, homophobia, because the alternative is hate, greed, and fascism. So that's it. I'm done.
Now, Templeton and Jessie, you both wrote for some of these magazines when they were still around. Could you both please speak to what they did well, maybe what we're missing now, and also some of the failings that Natalie has pretty handily taken on already? Templeton, maybe you could go first.
Sure. Yeah, my mic's on already. I think the original magazines, they did a great job of showing what, like, their idea of what skateboarding was. I think magazines are a reflection of the opinions of the people making the magazines, and the people making the magazines either thought that San Francisco was the center of the world or San Diego was the center of the world, and that's what they showed.
San Francisco.
That's debatable. So I think that they did a great job of showing their perspective, which was like just a very limited perspective. And, we got some really sick videos out of it, awesome photos, but not a lot of like journalism, but some cool stories for sure.
Jessie?
Is that on? We good? Okay. I think what the media did well before was that it provided a pretty predictable schedule. One, like working at a brand, I know that it's nice to know that the ad is due every month at a certain time. That's something we certainly don't do at Mess, and none of the other great and wonderful mags that are starting up are that excellent about it. Other than Closer, Jamie, you do a great job. But I think what this old world had was a pretty easy model for brands to plug into, and that gets a little bit at what Cole was saying before, where it's like a lot of the media in skateboarding was sort of made to facilitate and support the brands more than it was to really address journalism needs. I think what's changed is also going back to what Ashley Rayfeld was saying earlier with the skaters have more impact now almost. They have a voice, they have a channel. When I was sponsored, I was told by editors, we don't want to put girls in the mag because our advertisers don't want to see that. That was completely invented. They said the same thing about European skaters in the 80s. And then flip was on the scene, and it was the biggest thing ever, you know? And it's just like the industry has these self-imposed ideas and limitations that are really limiting the growth of what this can be for all of us. And I think the truth in journalism is one aspect, but also the way that the industry works, like this can be a virtuous circle or an echo chamber. And I think we need to move towards creating something that can help everyone. Like there is a way that we can put this together, you know? When you as a brand are buying a 2-page ad, what you are actually buying is a voice to support your riders, help your riders grow, help more diversity in the industry, because there's only one ad a month in Thrasher, and these teams have 80 people on them. Also, we need an avenue for younger photographers to come up. If these younger photographers aren't able to get a footing, we are going to have 75-year-old photographers on staff and 70-year-old pros in the magazines, and that's where we're going to be at in 20 years, if there's any industry left.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, shout out Ashley. Great paper talk. All the paper talks were wonderful. Hers was especially relevant to our panel today. Okay, so another weird thing that's happened is that as magazines have gone under, mainstream publications have taken a new interest in skateboarding. You can now read about skateboarding anywhere you want in what Munz calls the secular press. The result is that there's more coverage of skating, but less that's actually by skaters. And this is often kind of embarrassing. We're all familiar with this genre of photojournalism. We will be awarding cash prizes to anyone who can identify this trick. That's a huge set, or is it? I don't know what's going on there. And AI has made things even weirder. I mean, this is outside of the world of journalism. This is an ad for a bank, but you see shit like this too, and you're like, what does this have to do? That kid looks like he's having a good time. I don't know. So yeah, and this is funny, of course, but I think it reflects a broader problem, which is that people outside of skating don't really know how to talk about what we do, and skaters want to read coverage of skateboarding by other people who are involved in their scenes and keeping track of what's going on. So Willy is straddling these two worlds. He is a skater himself. I saw him skate yesterday, and and is also a story editor at the New York Times Magazine. So, Willy, what does the New York Times want out of a story about skateboarding, and why does it cover skateboarding at all?
I don't know if I know the answer to that question, honestly, but I mean, in my experience, the Times, I mean, we covered the Olympics extensively, so you had a picture from that. It was too close. So there's that. I mean, when there's a big event in skateboarding's in the news for a sort of natural reason, we're going to cover that. But otherwise, there's like lifestyle stories. One of the ones that you had up there, like one was by Jacob Gallagher, who works for the Styles Desk. So there's like a fashion angle to whatever that story was. There was another one that was like a Brooklyn moms who meet up under the Kosciuszko Bridge and skate in the morning. And like it's just kind of an interesting look at like a surprising look at skateboarding. And I would say that that's your typical mainstream media stories. Like, did you know like the skate witches, the Brujas of the Bronx? Like that was another story we did. And there's often sort of like, which I think captures, like to Ashley's point, this is earlier today, that is one of the big stories of the last decade in skateboarding is women in skateboarding. So they are capturing that. But I do think they're capturing it with like some blinkered assumptions about skateboarding sometimes. So there's that issue. Was that the extent of your question? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then another question is, we're staying on you. Pick that mic back up. How can you write about skating in a way that skaters and non-skaters alike will appreciate? Of course, you have to write for a mainstream audience here, a general audience, a non-skate audience, and you have to keep them interested. But you also don't want to be, doing this in writing. And so, how do you approach that, both as a writer and as an editor?
I mean, as an editor, I guess I was reminded outside that I have edited, because what I was saying going into this panel is I profiled Tyshawn Jones for the New York Times Magazine in 2019. And since then, it's not as if my editors are going up to me and saying, Willy, what's the latest in skateboarding? You know, like there's not a huge appetite for this, you know, at all, to be totally frank. But I was reminded that I did edit a profile of Wee Man by Katie Weaver, which I thought was great, and by a non-skater, though I had a hand in it in the background. That was more recent, so we have covered skateboarding since the Tyshawn story. But other than that, I can't think of any other examples, aside from like photographs of like women's Olympic skateboarders at some point.
So when you were editing, Katie, for that story, was it like correcting terminology, or were there like bigger kind of framing issues where you were like, this doesn't really speak to the skateboarding that I know?
We didn't have any huge issues. I was kind of like interested in having her ask him a little bit about because back then there was this kind of like, I felt like there was an exploitative relationship with little people in skateboarding, and so I was kind of curious to hear a little bit about that. I don't think we didn't end up going very far with that, because ultimately Katie was more interested in the Jackass side of it, I think, and that was ultimately like better copy, and so we stuck with that. But yeah, there were no issues there. For me, I mean, the profile form, I think, going back to like accountability journalism and whether this has any place in the mainstream media as it relates to skateboarding. We typically, I have only done profiles when writing about skateboarding, basically. And it's a natural sort of form for a magazine story of like in-depth reporting where you spend with someone who's a representative of a subculture, and through them you can sort of map out the subculture's walls for the sort of lay reader. That's a great form that we love, and so that's what I've turned to, and that's how I've always approached skateboarding when I've written about it. I've profiled Phelps as well for California Sunday. So.
Anyone has not read Willy's profile. Is it still on?
No.
All right. If anybody has not read Willy's profile of Jake Phelps for California Sunday, please read it.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I think the profile is a natural form for us, but it's not going to really lend itself to like accountability journalism or something. It would be kind of odd to pick up a magazine on Sunday morning with the paper and see like, well, here's this guy you've never heard of, and he's a piece of shit, and like he's like, and so it's an unusual, you know, so you kind of have to. You have to make people interested in the person. That doesn't mean going easy on them necessarily, but you need to care for them as a character and use them as a guide through this world. And that's sort of how I think about writing about a subculture for a mainstream audience.
Okay, another question. How many skateboarders are infiltrating the mainstream media machine besides me and you?
I think in our earlier conversations, that story that the Times ran about GX and the security guard at the B of A building, that incident, that was a double byline, Matt Ruby and Connor Doherty, and those are my esteemed colleagues, and those are between the three of us, I think there's one more guy at the Times who skates or did skate or something like that. So that's the extent of it, and it's a pretty big newsroom. But there are, of course, there's the Noahs. There's Noah Shannon, Noah Gallagher, both very talented writers. And so there's more and more. And I think there's something of a cohort effect. There's some better coverage you see, I hope, because there's just more and more people who grew up skateboarding who are aging into these jobs, essentially. But beyond that, there's not I wouldn't say that my colleagues otherwise are more interested in skateboarding or take it more seriously than they would have 20 years ago. But there are people around who know it a little bit.
Yeah, now most skate outlets don't have the resources that the New York Times does, right? And this is another crucial piece of this picture, is that the financials have changed over the years. It was no one ever got rich running a skate magazine. If you know how to do that, please get in touch with me. And, a lot of these small operations run by one or two people are just trying to break even, basically. And so it is time, these small publications, this was a nice collage that I did not make, but there's all these great new mags, people aren't starting them to get rich, and I want to talk a little bit about financial particulars. So it's time to go band for band. Jessie, how much does it cost to make mess?
Okay, well, I'll say this is a very big changing landscape as well, because our first issue, we printed around 4,000, 5,000 copies, I think, and it was a bit cheaper. During the pandemic, like everything else, supply chain, I mean, there was actually a month when there was no paper for even Thrasher to print, like their paper supplier ran out. And we had this same issue with trying to get our mag printed, so there was a supply and demand hiccups, but also printing and shipping has gone up a lot. So the shipping especially is like, without, Deluxe helps us to distribute. Without that, we would not have been able to do it. So I think it's like looking for creative solutions, and shout out to Kristen for thinking of that one, and to Jim and to Ashley, who was there at the time. That was huge for us. Also, I think for something that's promoting this kind of diversity to arrive at a shop in a Deluxe box has a lot of weight. That helps a lot for shops to be more open to it. But the printing of it, I think, it's around $10,000 to $15,000. It depends how much we do. It's not like each copy costs a certain amount, because the more that you print, the better the price you get. We print through a place called Mix'em. They're great to deal with, but they're essentially like the Costco of printing or something. Like we don't go in some print room and get to check all the specs and everything. It's very cost effective. We found good paperweight. We find that we can do a good quality magazine, nice satin cover, all of that stuff that would cost way too much at a more independent printer. I would love to use some of the other printers. We'll probably explore other options for our next issue, because for us, timing, the turnaround is not fast with the printer that we use. I know that Plank and 2001, they print with no cot. That's another option. So there's a lot more printers, I think, popping up. Like, it's just a time of change for everything. But yeah, you could conceivably do it. It's probably cheaper than a couple rent payments to print something, and you don't have to print 5,000 copies. You could print 500. It's totally scalable.
I remember being like 12 years old and reading Transworld. I had a Transworld subscription. Sorry, everybody. And it was sick. I loved it. And I was always like, this is what I'm going to do when I grow up. I'm going to be a staff writer for Transworld Skateboarding, and then I'm going to buy a house. And then I turned 13. Templeton, what were your annual earnings from your most lucrative year as a skate magazine writer?
They're pretty light. Mostly what I did is I was kind of the blogger for the skateboard mag, so I was like posting the daily news, and then I handled the social media stuff, and I would write, occasional articles, and I probably made close to $15,000 in a year, like in my best year, and like I started off making like $300 a month, so pretty light, and I doubt that that's changed that much.
Cole, how do you support your operation? Do you have a day job?
I'm a part-time blogger, and with Simple Magic, yes, I do have a day job, which is how I'm able to do the blogging. And with Simple Magic, I originally started it on Substack, which is a free tool to use. I've since moved it from Substack over to Ghost for a host of reasons, and now that costs about $400 a year to host that, which is covered by the kind people who are paid subscribers to the newsletter. And I bring in a cool $1,100 a year. Okay. Canadian. Yeah, so that's like $40. And that covers the hosting costs, that allows me to pay contributors, and everything else comes out of pocket.
Joa, you have some paid subscribers as well. Are you able to support yourself off of YouTube and Patreon? Can you talk a little bit about what it means that YouTube is your job?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a Patreon. I don't make that much money from YouTube itself, because I don't upload that often to YouTube. So it's mostly people that pay me monthly to support whatever I'm doing, and then yeah, there's like private stuff that I upload, and then I do live streams and stuff and archive those for those people. So yeah, that's YouTube, whatever I'm doing at my computer, that is my job. So I'm lucky enough there's people that'll pay me to do that, so I do not have to have, I don't have to, I mean, I guess my day, yeah, this is my day job, is this. So yeah.
We did not pay him to be here today. I'm proud to say. All right, so now I want to get back to the actual constraints on journalism and skateboarding. We've covered some of the factors that impact this. We've covered the demise of the old advertising model. Maybe that's a stretch, but there's only one big magazine left. We've covered the financial difficulties of running a small outlet now. Also, not everybody needs to be or wants to be an investigative reporter. Like, I don't want to imply that if you're making a skate magazine because your friends shoot cool photos that you have to be like doing accountability journalism in it. But it doesn't really exist for the most part, and Cole wrote about this when he wrote about Chris Cole in August. So he said, in skateboarding, journalism only exists in fits and starts. What's left of the traditional media ecosystem focuses on entertainment, not news. In fact, that's all skateboarding media has ever been, entertainment and brand promotion. Serious skateboarding-related reporting either happens on the margins, in blogs and the like, or if a story is big enough, it'll get picked up by a mainstream outlet. What's left of traditional skate media either doesn't have the ability or will to cover challenging stories. And then you say a little bit about Nigel's Thrasher interview. I was just hoping you could talk about that a little more.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest issues, because if this stuff doesn't get covered when it needs to be covered, there aren't people with the experience or the know-how to do that. And I use the example of the Nigel Houston interview where he is asked about the allegations that have been circling him for years and had really been they've really weighed on his career and him as a person and a persona. And he finally addresses them. It's kind of a ham-handed thing. And the follow-up is, what's it like being a pro skater? And that doesn't mean you have to go deeper into that, but it's also like not a satisfying conclusion. You're just moving on from something serious into whatever that was. And sorry, what's the end of the question there?
I guess we could go to another question, which is, can you imagine a business model for skate publications who do want to cover this stuff better?
It would be worker-owned stuff, like a defector model. That's how I would see it. My only concern with that is I think skateboarding audiences have been conditioned to not take in skateboarding like that. There's not like a rich history of journalism or essays about skateboarding. People just watch clips. They watch interview shows, whatever. So worker-owned, I think, is the future. Are there enough people to fund that are interested in seeing that in the world? I mean, get at me, simplemagic.ca.
I think, you could argue that there's a parallel with sports. Probably a lot of sports fans just love putting on the game and kicking back, But there's also, because sports is a multi-billion-dollar industry, or each sport is a multi-billion-dollar industry on its own, there is interest, and there are robust, journalism ecosystems around sports, places like The Athletic. It's not because every sports fan is dying to read investigative reporting, but investigative reporters cover it because it is a economically and culturally huge issue, right? And so reporters cover it the way they cover other huge economic and cultural issues. Skateboarding is now a $2.5 billion industry, as we heard earlier. It's increasingly feels like, depending on where you live, more a part of mainstream culture than a subculture. That's up for debate. I don't want to derail this whole thing. Yeah. But could we see something similar happening in the sportification process or otherwise?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the example that I've talked about before, it's like as you're saying, ESPN, they have essentially conflicts of interest with whoever they're broadcasting, whatever league they're broadcasting, but they will still report on so-and-so football player who does a bad thing. And just to jump back a bit, because after I wrote that piece about Chris Cole, I did talk to some folks who work at Thrasher, and they're like, hey, we only did this interview because we told Nyjah that we have to talk about this. So it's like, that's like sort of progress. But I also talked to them, and for them, it was an issue of not having resources, not having, again, the experience and know-how and how to cover this stuff. There might be some unwillingness there. But yeah, and sorry, what was the question about the sportification helping?
Well, the question was just, I guess, what would it take for skateboarding reporters to exist in the way that sports reporters do?
That's a good question. I haven't figured it out.
Would anyone want to tackle that one?
I would guess a lot of people would have to want to watch skateboarding in a competition form who don't skateboard, which doesn't seem to be the case. So that is like, it is a small thing that we're involved in, and that has, you know, there are good things about that and there are bad things about that. But ultimately, like, you want to watch the post-game interview with like Aaron Rodgers where he's going to say something. Like there's a big ecosystem of information, and then like AM, you know, like the amount of analysis of the NFL is insane because there's guys who will call from Queens into the radio to yell at, you know, whoever, because they're upset about this. And there's just so many guys who care and have, for whatever reason, bound their entire lives up in it, who don't touch a football. And there just isn't, I don't know if anyone else had this experience, but I did, watching street skateboarding in the Olympics with people who don't skate. And I was watching like Jagger Eaton do a backside flip nose grind down a hubba or whatever, like first try. Yeah, thank you. Which is insane, but if he, whatever, it doesn't look like anything. They see them miss and they say, are they good? Like, I don't get it, you know? And it's odd because it's hard to turn it into a spectator sport. I think that's been maybe a good thing for skateboarding, but it's certainly not gonna lend it to the sort of like serious coverage and post-game analysis. I don't know what this new one is where they huck tricks down stairs or whatever that's supposed to, like, yeah. Maybe that'll do it. Maybe that'll do it.
All right, you heard it here first. Mike Moe saving the skate media ecosystem. Natalie, would you like to add anything about what kind of skate media ecosystem you'd want to see? What kinds of business models might facilitate a healthier environment?
I've just been thinking a lot. There is kind of an amazing canon of literary skateboarders who are producing some really interesting work in the creative nonfiction format, and I think that might be appealing to a certain kind of nerdy niche community, and I'll just plug it. Yeah, I do have this book coming out in September, and it's been a real weird like journey working with sort of a mainstream publisher, trying to figure out what would appeal, try to avoid a glossary of terms, but I think that storytelling, people are interested in other people's lives who've overcome adversity, and I'm hoping that that will resonate with others. So maybe, yeah, just go to your local library, support your library. Yeah, and just be curious about people, and maybe that will help us.
Yeah. Great. Anyone else want to take that one? If not, I'll happily tell my story. Okay. All right, I'm going to tell a story. I've talked so much, like probably more than any other panel host at Slow Impact ever has, and I'm going to keep talking more. In 2018, Willy already mentioned the GX1000 case that the New York Times ended up covering, where a skateboarder got into an altercation with a security guard that left the security guard in a coma, and the skateboarder was charged in court with, I think, assault and battery, something like that. I was fresh out of college. I had just moved to San Francisco. I was working a day job and writing before and after. I had a few relationships in the skateboard media world, and an editor I knew asked if I would go to the courthouse to cover a court date for this skateboarder. And I was delighted to do that, of course. So I went, they brought the guy out, they announced when his next court date would be, they took him away, nothing happened, but a bunch of his friends had come out to support him, and a bunch of the security guards' family members had also come out to support their uncle. And being the good little school newspaper, fresh-eyed journalist that I was, I went to the security guard's family and I told them where I was from and that I was covering the story and that I wanted to ask them some questions for the story. And they said, oh, we don't think all skateboarders are bad. We just want justice for our uncle and, you know, whatever. They like gave me a little comment. And then I went to all the skaters and I said, hey guys, I'm from this outlet. I'm covering this ongoing trial. I'd love to, you know, ask you guys a couple questions, get a few quotes for the story. And they were not happy about that. They were not happy to hear that. And so they didn't give me a comment. And I told them that I wanted to be able to represent all sides of the story and, you know, all the things all the things they taught me to say on the school newspaper. But they were quite upset. So I went outside and called my editor, as I had been asked to do. And my editor said, how'd it go? And I said, oh, nothing really happened. They, you know, brought him in, brought him out. I got some good quotes from the security guards' family members, but I didn't really get anything from the skaters. They didn't want to talk. There was a pause. And the editor said, did you tell them who you were writing for? I said, yeah, of course. I'm a journalist. I have to represent myself transparently. I have to tell them who I'm writing for, you know? He was not happy to hear that. And yeah, he got very angry, very upset. And I was really confused and you know, like disappointed and felt like I had fucked up. And I talked to him again later that day, and I was like, listen, man, I'm really sorry. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I was trying to go in there and get quotes to do this story for you. You know, I wanted to, I'm like in a courthouse. I'm in a very official setting. I want to represent myself as a journalist. And he said, yeah, that might be how it is in journalism, but this is actually some skate shit. This is some skate shit. Those rules don't apply. This world is all about relationships, and you've jeopardized my relationship with these people who are influential, who are connected to the people that take out the ads that keep my publication afloat. And that is when I started thinking about this panel. That was almost 7 years ago. So, unless anyone else has... Joa?
Good story. And it is a good story because, you know, asking about the sportification, like, you know, The Atlantic, all these other publications, people that cover sports, and there's so many comparisons between, you know, this oftentimes come up between sports. It's like, we're so small in comparison, and I think it hurts skateboarding a lot, especially when it comes to something like investigative journalism, but even like, or journalism at all, even kind of like having an honest conversation about anything that is happening, that's like incredibly difficult to do because, you know, growing up, I've watched certain people that I think started out relatively independently covering skateboarding, and then the longer you stay inside skateboarding, like the industry, the machine, whatever, it has like this gravitational pull, and it ends up kind of like sucking people in, and then the more people that you meet, the more roads get shut off. You know, so, and like, you're, in my opinion anyway, because of the size, like you're saying, like, you can't talk to those guys because now it's jeopardizing my relationships because everything is interconnected. Like, from where I'm sitting, my point of view is like, I talk to, like, I go to almost nothing. Like, I talk to pretty much nobody. Like, I'll like occasionally DM, you know, some pro skaters on Instagram or something about whatever, but it's like, you know, even like just from having somebody follow me on Instagram and having like a brief exchange with them, like if something comes up that they're involved with, I almost feel like guilty about it. Do you know what I mean? Even though you shouldn't. And so if you're getting paid off of like a skate brand, I imagine that like guilt or that, you know, feeling of, you know, not wanting to betray or whatever, or not wanting to go against anybody is, you know, 10 times, you know, just like an Instagram exchange. So, you got to be pretty much in my opinion, I hope there's another option, but I think like you can't work in the industry if you want to cover anything at all. You got to be completely independent, unfortunately, because one of the most common things that I get is people telling me like, dude, like I wish I could say this or whatever. It's like somebody like feeding me information or whatever. There's a lot of good people that work in skateboarding, a lot of really sensible individuals, but like, you know, they work for a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, and then you can't even say like, you know, you scrape that manual or whatever. So, yeah, it's like, it's kind of shitty, but that's the way I think it is.
Yeah, and those people that are feeding you information are integral parts of this whole process, right? We need all of you media people. We need the whistleblowers. We need the confidential sources. We will protect you. It will not get back to your employer. Talk to journalists. That's the way shit gets out. Jessie, you've seen both sides of the curtain here. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, is still on, yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things is, yeah, it's very connected, so thank you for pointing that out. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that, quite honestly. And I think also, the same thing with your story. There's a certain big publication that also owns a brand that's very closely associated with that crew that you mentioned. There's so much overlap. It's out of good intentions, like people I just mentioned owning those brands. It's out of good intention. And people are trying to do as much as they can in the industry and something they're very passionate about. But yeah, this is a critical fail point of that structure.
Well, as we wrap this up, I want to shout out some of the other people who have done good work on this front. There's no way to make an exhaustive list. I'm definitely leaving people off. But, I definitely want to shout out Sam McGuire, Kyle Beachy is here. Tobias Coughlin-Bogue is here. Another one of my mentors, OGs, and big bros. Anthony, the writer, Papalardo. Andrew Merle is here. He did the Vice piece on Jason Jessie. That was one of the first, big modern era, skate scandals. Chris Lawton in the UK is terrific. Claire Allume in France has done wonderful writing. Dr. Indigo Willing has written on this. Neftali Williams, and so many more, so many other people. Thank you to everybody for doing that. And I think now we will open it up for questions. Does that sound good? Yeah? All right. Mike.
Let's go with SEMA real quick.
Okay, sorry.
Over here. Max, why don't we change the slide so it's not so text heavy?
Oh, yeah.
Stunning. Hi again. I guess thank you, but also we should be talking about this. It feels really heavy, but what Natalie alluded to, as skateboarders, we are all susceptible to the isms of the world. Sometimes it takes you maybe hanging out with different people, maybe having a child, dealing with kind of real life stuff outside of your skateboard culture. I entered skateboarding really normally myself, even though I work with Skate Girl. I was a Glen Haven local, drinking beers, sorry dad, going on skate trips to SF, right? So love skate culture, I'm a skater. But yeah, I feel like that's why it's kind of weird saying thank you for that and the heaviness. So just reminding everyone that safe places, sorry, this is a little bit of a comment, but safe places also means that we're creating spaces for people to fuck up. Like when you learn a new trick. We're always so scared of fucking up, and we're all so scared of being on a slap forum, and that shouldn't be the extreme of us being humans and creating this new generation of, I don't want the next generation to have to deal with that, or the people that are in this room in the industry who are really great people, as you said. So to turn it on maybe a more positive note, do y'all have any examples of video media or print media that you can share that you think kind of addressed the humanism of skateboarding well? And if you don't have an example, which is kind of sad, I feel like there has been some, I can think a few on top of my head. Do you have a suggestion of how people can approach that type of thing, I guess, and not have to go to the extreme? I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Seema. Yeah. Anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is pretty accessible skateboarding media, not just because he's here, and I think he's a good guy, but this old ledge, I mean, is maybe not directly talking about those issues, but I think it's really accessible to get people who don't know much about skateboarding in the door. It provides an historical aspect to skateboarding and why skateboarders care about stuff when it comes to spots, etc. So I think that series does a really good job. When it comes to those other subjects, I have to do some more thinking. Thank you.
I would add, I thought Brian Anderson's Epically Latered was really, really beautiful and really made me proud to be a skateboarder. Really made me proud to be a skateboarder. There's lots, most of our media is celebratory, right? Oh, I'm sorry.
I would add Minding the Gap. I don't think this is an obscure recommendation, but it was a really beautiful documentary.
Yeah, real quick. Natalie, when we were preparing for this, you had a figure about issues of a magazine that came out without addressing the Gator story that I thought was really eye-popping. Do you recall that? Shoot, you said it on the Zoom call. So I'm going to try to give the Cliff Notes version, but Natalie mentioned that it was like 2 years worth of Trans World skateboarding issues that came out. No mention of the Gator news. Just, it didn't happen. And
Actually,
go ahead.
comment was, so yeah, post Gator, 1992. Not only was there no commentary, but 29 issues went by with not a single photo of a female skater. That's 2+ years. So there was like, I think it was Lori Rigsby, Sasha Clark, 29 issues, and then Jody McDonald. And so yeah, it was just kind of a weird parallel, like that this, this violent thing went down. We're not discussing that, and we're not looking at women skate. So yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. That was depressing. But yeah, but having that historical context, I am actually hopeful. Like I'm so grateful for people calling out some of these issues, thinking about it on their blogs, their videos, and I think we are moving in the right direction. Yeah, but yeah, historically, it's been bleak.
Hello. So I'm very nervous to say this, but I wrote it down. I think you guys have everybody in here has done a great job in the journalism of like these hard subjects like allegations and domestic violence and stuff like that. I've seen it firsthand. And my question basically is now that we've put all these topics and information out on blast and done the best that we could do, I hope that in the near future we can cover the resolution of these situations and encourage everybody in this room that if they have the bandwidth, that they could listen and try to understand these topics to the best, because we're all just skateboarders and we're all just humans and we're all just doing the best that we can. And it would help both the inclusivity of both the people who have maybe caused some of this harm and for some of the people that don't understand how that harm got there. I think that it's not an excuse, but oftentimes these problems develop from childhood trauma that may or may not be perpetuated by skateboarding itself. I just wrote this in here, possible CTI could be something that we could look at, especially in pro skateboarders. Once again, not an excuse. I think that also the act or self-destruction of skateboarding itself and the process of it. I encourage everyone to work together to help find ways to prevent and counteract these situations without inflaming, potentially bullying, or outcasting, because this can drop off after journalism itself, which I'm sure you guys all understand. I personally have had so many skateboarders hit me up in DMs, and some of them are people who have had major allegations, and because of my situation, they've talked to me on a deeper level that they'll probably never talk to you guys, because us people who have made mistakes in our past, we have to find a way to come together and unite and move forward in a positive way that helps skateboarding reach this level of full inclusivity. I think that's all I got to say.
Thank you. I just want to say it is important to have grace and yeah, not necessarily like stone cold condemn people. We can all change and mature and evolve. So yeah, thank you for saying that. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Joa. I was just wondering, since you started YouTubing before you got on Sci-Fi, how your approach to making videos and, I mean, has changed since you're now sort of a part of that clique. And honestly, Ryan, I'd like to hear from you too, since you've been pretty outspoken and now you're kind of having like you're a lot more in that sphere now than you were like say 5-10 years ago. He's not on the fucking panel. all right, you're off the hook. I still want to hear from you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure Ryan probably talked to Jared. I was about to do a massive piece on Ryan that got put on, and I had to throw hours and hours of labor away. No, I mean, honestly, it's barely changed, you know, like, for the most part, like, I'm not gonna, like, if I know saying something, like, very particular is gonna, like, really negatively impact somebody that, you know, is involved with sci-fi, then I'm like probably not gonna do it. But it's like I can pretty much say whatever I want. It's just like occasionally Jared will be like, hey, don't say that about Mike Burnett maybe, because we have like a spread next month in Thrasher or whatever. So, but outside of that, it's pretty much like almost nothing has changed. There's very few, and that's like what I was talking about earlier. You want to. I want to like be closely involved with as few people as I can, so I don't, you know, prevent myself from being able to talk about things that people want to hear about. So yeah, it hasn't changed that much. I'd probably quit my sponsors, I would think, because it's like, you know, one is my job and one is not my job, so, you know. It's not like I'm going to be like, hey, I'm working at Quiznos now, but at least I still get free boards. So, yeah.
I will just put this on the record right here that Joa did, in fact, get me kicked off Orbs.
I did get you kicked off Orbs, but then I got you on Spitfire.
That was the layup right there, yeah. Yeah, I actually...
Sorry about that, though, also. That was my bad.
It's okay, yeah. My relationship with Joa has caused me much, not pain and anguish, but anxiety over the years, but I love him. And I will say, just on a personal note, that Joa works extremely hard. I spend a lot of time with him. I stay on his couch when I visit him in California. I go on tour with him, and I'm always blown away at how seriously he takes his job. Like, he understands the platform that he has, and he really... he really takes his job seriously. But I had a question for you, Joa, actually, because I got the microphone. I can do whatever I want. What is the future of your platform? Because we've talked a little bit about this privately, but you feel like you kind of have like an outsized role in the skateboarding media ecosystem. I think everyone in here would agree with that. And you know, it almost feels like anything you say unleashes millions of little gifted hater puppies that just harass whoever, your minions. And I don't think that you're happy about that, but you can't tell them not to do that. And I think you want to speak freely and candidly. And unfortunately, you are kind of the only person occupying that space on a platform like YouTube where you can reach a lot of people. Because I think, you know, Cole and a handful of other people do a really good job of that. Unfortunately, most young people don't read anymore, so... You know, that's just an unfortunate reality. But yeah, what's the future of Gifted Hater?
Well, I mean, I don't know. What you're saying is like kind of an unfortunate consequence a lot of the time of things that I've said in the past, where it does set off like a chain reaction. And so I do have to be careful about, you know, what I say. So, I mean, I would hope that, you know, because it's one thing to like, you know, sit in like and critique and complain and, you know, point out what everybody is doing wrong, and joking about it sometimes, other times being serious. But I would hope in the future that I can, maybe build towards something that's like more generative, because I'm not like planning on, becoming like some like yes man industry dude or whatever. But I also want to contribute something that is not only critical. I've experimented, I've like done a couple skate contests and stuff. But yeah, I'd like to be in a position where I can do something to give somebody else to talk about. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, hopefully do more of that going forward. I'm not like a hugely entrepreneurial, industrious individual. So I don't have any major ideas at the moment. Unfortunately, I'm not going to lie, but maybe something will hit me at some point or another, or maybe somebody will have an idea for me. But I'd like to build towards, especially in a climate right now where, I heard at Agenda trade show, everybody was like committing seppuku, like in front of each other, and everyone was like wasted. So it's just like dark right now. So yeah, just like maybe something, take people's mind off how miserable everything seems to be. That would probably be a good step.
Thank you. Hey, thank you guys. This was awesome. This whole panel needs to be like a documentary. But no, my question is, because I'm a video journalist, I do documentaries, but how can we adopt a more like multidisciplinary approach in skateboarding journalism? Because sometimes you need outside perspectives in order to make a point, and then in the case of my work, like to save DIY, like we got the businesses and the little kids and the everyone lobbying, but like how can we adopt like a more multidisciplinary like approach in journalism?
I got one. I want to get to that because that's a large part why we started Mass Skate Mag, because it was like creating an alternative space for conversation, and I think it's just giving more people a voice. Because while all these old previous magazines existed, it was pretty uniform from one to the next. The voice of Thrasher and Transworld, like one was cleaner, shinier paper, but like it's kind of the same vibe. Transition versus street maybe, but it's not, in terms of the voice and the type of people that were represented, it was pretty uniform. And I think everyone will gain something, like skateboarding is for everyone. So for us to be able to allow more people to have a voice is a big step towards that. Granted, it's more through, what we're doing has been more through the lens of just photos and typical kind of skate interviews, but I think we give people a platform and a voice that might not ordinarily have that many pages in a Thrasher, or some of the previous magazines wouldn't have been shown at all.
Hey y'all, I have a question sort of specifically for Templeton, but other people can address it as well. We didn't talk much about podcasts, and that kind of creates a space where you can have a more like long form, like this panel can be a podcast, and it doesn't have the same restraints or parameters as more traditional written or video journalism. So first off, I want to know how much work goes into doing that podcast, like making that, and then also, do you see that as a space where this type of stuff could be explored in a more, not open way, but like lengthy way that doesn't have the restrictions, say Willy was talking about with like fitting copy, into a paper format or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that there's just, like, every media kind of has its kind of thing that it's good at, and podcasts are good at long form stuff. I think to cover like important issues would probably take more work than what I typically put in, because like a lot of the stuff that we do on Mostly Skateboarding, it's kind of off the cuff. Spend like an hour prepping, we watch the videos or whatever. So if we're going to cover a serious topic, I would want to take that seriously and like make sure I kind of have my T's crossed and I's dotted and everything. But definitely it would be a good forum, and I think you could also translate it into video pretty easily if it was like important like that. Maybe like 2 or 3 hours an episode, and then like when I do the Instagram reel highlight, it's probably like another 3 hours or something. No problem.
Hey, thanks everybody for the conversation. It's really interesting. Something that I might not be the best to speak on, but I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts or ideas, opinions about it. When you talk about the relationship between skateboarding and sport, as a Philadelphia fan, the media is well known for being brutal to like the athletes and the circus, but they also create a lot of the storylines that, you know, as fans we buy into and we follow. In athletics and in sport, there's the beat writer, and outside of like the last few pages of any like Thrasher magazine that gives you the update, is there an example of, or do you have any thoughts on like what a beat writer looks like in skateboarding, and whether or not like you could potentially even like approach something like that when there's so many people doing it?
Willy, I'm going to ask you to take this one.
I'm trying to think. Adam helpfully yelled Monday Links. I mean, Costa and Quarter Snacks has like, you know, he has running commentary. He follows everything. He compiles his weekly top 10. You can follow skateboarding through Quarter Snacks. It's one view into it. But I mean, he has a voice, and he also, it's a platform. I mean, I think Mike's written for Quarter Snacks. He publishes freelancers. So I mean, for me, that's useful as like an older guy aging out, like as a way of keeping in touch, you know. But in terms of like an actual beat writer, it kind of goes back to, I mean, the point I was making, which is we're not gonna, there isn't, the Philadelphia Eagles have like more fans probably than there are skateboarders, right? I mean, I don't know what so it's just one team is just an enormous thing and an enormous public to address. So they have beat writers, but I mean, there's never been an appetite for it within skateboarding even. Because a magazine, even when the magazines were good or existed, or there were a lot of them, they weren't even really covering skateboarding. There were trips, and they would be like, this is how you order a beer in Brazil, and it was fucking sick, and like this happened, and you know, it's just like and there were like, I mean, like I love Dave Carney, like there were great voices in this world, but there hasn't ever really been your New York Post style football guy who's going to have running commentary on like what's going on. So it's just totally alien to skateboarding, I think. For like structural reasons. And I don't know if now would be like a crazy time for it to start. It would be nice, but I can't think of any good example to get back to answering your question.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason is that beat writers usually are salaried, and there's no salaries in skate media.
Yeah, and at the risk of being tacky, I've been doing my newsletter now for 3 years. I've been doing it so long. Sure, thank you. I appreciate that. That I'm now referencing myself week after week. There are like subplots about brand collabs and stuff where it's like I'm my own beat writer. I'm essentially just writing for myself. So it's a small community, but I'm there.
Cole, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, but you have such a great stage presence, so petition for you to start doing YouTube videos and/or podcasts so that you could speak to a bigger audience. The blog is amazing. I read it all the time, but I think you should get on that.
Thank you.
Hey, Max. I think this is more of an answer to a question you asked, is what is that trick that guy's doing, the very terrible photojournalist thing? And most of the people in this room are old enough to remember the A-Team ads where you had to try to replicate a trick. And I think that's that Gershon Mosley one that didn't really have a name. He's like doing that thing where you catch your board between your feet and then you land again. So I think that's like Gershon Mosley.
All right. Please see me outside to collect your $100.
It looks like Jerry to me. I don't know.
First of all, shout out to the panel for leading such a wonderful and riveting discussion about the state of skate media. But I think it's important to talk about an elephant in the room, Slap Magazine. Slap Magazine hasn't been published since, I think, the beginning of the Great Recession. They went out, I think, just shortly after 2008. And yet, the message board lives on. On its best days, it is a repository of all types of breaking news and gossip and commentary. On its worst days, it is, the crooked. It is a crooked pillar on the fourth estate that is skate journalism. So, what do you all think about the fact that Slap has persisted in its zombie form and its use as a source or as a something that serves as a thorn in your respective sides?
I mean, I think Slap fills a void because there's a lot of skateboarding topics, subjects, whatever that don't get covered, and the only place for people to go and read about, potentially post about, is Slap. And a lot of that can be pretty nasty, but sometimes it'll help surface a story, help flesh out a story. So there are positives and negatives to it, but essentially I think Slap is filling a void, but also the void.
Yeah, I think clearly, I mean, the popularity of Slap, and it speaks to the desire for at least slightly more information that people aren't getting, because there isn't any, there's nothing. So, like you say, it all funnels through there, because some people anyway, hunger for it. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of bad for it to work that way with no intermediaries, but it's what we have, I guess.
I would say it's good to approach Slap like the way your history teacher told you to approach Wikipedia, where it's like you can find out about something on there, but don't treat it as a real source, like shore that up before really putting it in the world in a more official way. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I get on Slap, I'm like, oh my God. But then other times I'm very grateful that it exists because, like you're saying, it is like a source of breaking news. You do have to be very critical of what you're reading on there. So, I would definitely, don't cite it. Get, a second opinion if that is available to you. But honestly, especially more recently, I've been pretty grateful for Slap, whereas before I've kind of scoffed at it. But there's people on there who really care a lot, and I think there's a good amount of people on. There's people who have bad intentions, but I think there's a lot of people who have good intentions. And I've gained a bit of respect for that community of people, especially involving because the Chris Cole story, they were unrelenting for the whole year, and it's like, are these people crazy? I don't know, but when everything came down to it, it was like there was a really well archived, and laid out case, with all the screenshots and stuff that were available at the time. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it sucks, sometimes it's great, but until there's a better alternative, you're gonna learn a hell of a lot more reading on Slap than you would an Instagram comment section. So I think it's the best that we have for a lot of these kind of more mysterious or dark topics.
All right, we got time for 2 more questions. I'm going to do Zamara real quick.
Hello, I'm hidden back here. Let me find my question. Okay, so I'm just more curious overall, getting more context about journalism outside of skateboarding and how that's shifted in recent years. What was journalism like, some years ago before, and what is it like now? And then within this current spectrum of journalism, how does skateboarding fit into that? And more generally, does it even belong there? Especially when talking about more serious subjects within the community. And if it doesn't belong there, where does it belong? Would be the question. So thank you.
Thanks, Samara. Good question. Yeah, I mean, some of those, where does it belong? I'm not sure I can answer that completely. But what I will say is that a lot of the issues that plague skate journalism are not confined to skate journalism. Any kind of access journalism, I think, suffers from this problem where people don't want to, burn their sources and destroy their relationships. And this is why we don't have a good White House press corps. You know what I mean? This is why, whatever, some people never seem to go down, I don't know. But in terms of how things have shifted over the years, as everyone knows, things have moved online. I worked for a paper where I heard, it was still printing a paper edition, a weekly edition, and I heard the big boss one time say, well, he was on the phone, and he was like, we really got to get out of print. We need to stop printing this thing. So, some of these same things apply in skateboarding, of course. And I think also we've seen more people on Substack, more individuals, more small outlets. In some cases, I mean, Cole mentioned Defector. In some cases, started by people who had been at bigger places. I don't know, but anyone else want to take that one?
Willy.
Maybe we should resort to zines again. Let's go old school. Seriously. They're fabulous. That's where I find like really deep stories about like women's lives. So yeah, I'm advocating for zines.
I mean, I think just to add on to what Max was saying, I think that, a lot of one bad trend of like the last 10 years in mainstream media is that like the Times, for example, we have less competition than we used to have. And that's not good. That's not good for the papers that have suffered, but that's not good for us either. And I think that the same is probably true. You can think of comparisons in skate media where there's one incumbent that has kind of all the power. That's not a healthy ecosystem. So that I think has been a bad trend. The move to the internet has good and bad qualities to it. You're much more aware of audience feedback. That can be good, that can be bad. So I mean, there's a lot has happened in media in the last 10 years. And then of course there's a lot of billionaire ownership of newspapers, which of course has its risks and downsides. So there's like a lack of independence and a lack of competition that I think are overall like some of the headwinds we're looking at.
Hi, thank you guys very much. I guess another now defunct publication that kind of goes in hand with Cole was saying how Thrasher was made to promote independent trucks. Big Brother was made to promote, was it World or Blind at the time? So like they went about, creating, promote advertisements and whatnot for their publication. Although at the time in the 90s, it was very much so like a Nevermind and kind of Attitude era where they were just kind of like throwing whatever graphic content that they can to the wall and seeing what would sell and kind of creating all these different images in magazines that would ultimately affect the youth of that time or adolescence. And I mean, thankfully nowadays that there are like other publications that have kind of been better and been more inclusive to different groups. Do you think that it is almost like good that like we're almost like trying to move away from that sort of, I mean, obviously to move away from that type of like promotions and advertisements in media, almost paying like reparations to a degree for being more inclusive to, women and non-binary LGBTQ individuals in skateboarding, and to kind of allow for more voices to be heard on that front. So yeah, it's kind of long-winded, but yeah, thank you.
Sweet, do we have one more?
Wait, we haven't answered his question.
Oh, sorry. My fault, sorry, I'm fried. Cut that, Miyagi.
Just to clarify, so the question is it good that we're moving away from advertising business models in skate media?
More so like, was it almost like too late from like the 90s to current day to like be promoting more women skaters, like how she was saying there was like 29 issues between the Gator allegations of skating that like in that time in the 90s. So like it was almost like I guess like a push under the rug kind of topic to include those individuals in skateboarding. And now it's like it's far more welcome than should have been done sooner. So more progressive.
Yeah, you kind of answered it. Yeah, should have been done sooner. but yeah, I'm excited because like there's so many Dolores magazine, Mess and Into the Mirror in Brazil. These are just dynamic, independent projects that are kind of cutting edge and really vibrant. And I'm glad there's like a whole mix of things that we can subscribe to that don't seem to be so dependent on, conforming to, to advertisements.
In Natalie's work with Women's Skate History, which if you haven't checked out, you should. And yeah, media landscape, bleak. Landscape, generally bleak. But, you know, there is, in my opinion, room for positivity because we care about this shit, and that's why we're doing it. And I think maybe Tim Pool cares about what he's doing too, unfortunately. But exactly, please, a round of boos. Boonies. But I think that is a light, is that we give a shit, and that's why we're doing this. So hopefully, I'm kind of just going on a tangent here, but I think that's nice.
All right, this is the final question.
First, I want to say thank you guys for being here, and thank you to this entire room. It's such a unique part of skateboarding that I think, like, I'm so happy that Ryan got this type of thing together, to get these voices together, because, you know, I work in a lot of other parts of skateboarding that maybe not a lot of people in this room really care for, but sometimes between myself and Alex White, it feels like this uphill battle against like the cog of sport and Olympic movement and yada yada. And there's a few of us who try to keep it feeling like skateboarding. And do you think that there is a general just total disinterest from this side to go that way, or is there more of a block from, say, the old guard who won't let them in? I mean, you know, a bunch of them are my friends, but you see like the platform was like the platform's covering the shit is like platform and like all these cheesy, not really the greatest, like the real surface level media outlets. And is that just because there's not a way for people from this end to get in there, or is there just not an interest in it from this side? Because I would love for more voices, unique voices on that side to cover the stories. There's so many amazing female skateboarders that I don't think anyone in this room even knows exist, from other countries that are incredible beyond anything we've ever thought would happen. And it's just like, I'm a part of the two movements, but they feel so separate. But there's some way they need to collide in a way to help skateboarding for this crew and obviously for everybody across the world. I don't know. I'm kind of just like, everyone come hang out with me. It feels like, you know. But the point is, like, is there a need for it, or is there even a want for it, or is it an uphill battle that we just got to let the Olympics be the Olympics and it's never gonna, you know, feel like skateboarding?
I got an answer for that, sort of. I mean, it's a bit of an abstract take on it, but I think it's related to also like is there someone who's going to have a beat or cover this from more of a narrative angle? But the main difference I think that's happened in the past few years is that there is like this bottom-up like movement where like someone like Nora Vasconcelos can have her own channel and her own voice rather than, you know, waiting for a gatekeeper to give her the voice. I think that change has changed so much else in skateboarding, even with the brands, you know, like we look at these other sports as an example, but like all of the brands should understand that we in skateboarding have so much power that other sports don't have. Like we essentially own our own channels that we put the content out on. If you're in basketball and you got to go to ESPN, that's not cheap, you know? Like that, they pay for that stuff, but they don't even own the channel. So with that is a bit of journalism accountability, which is great. But I think also like it is the responsibility of the industry to be a big part of this, to support media, because otherwise we won't own any of these channels. It will be like, you know, it'll be owned by YouTube and Reddit and everything else. We're lucky that Slap even exists as a zombie message board, and we need to support this stuff more. Like, it's a call to action for the industry. And I think as far as contests, that voice I think that thinking is opening up. I do understand it feels like a Sisyphean battle for sure, but I think that it's so new, you know, like you look at the change in the industry in the last 8 years and what we'll see from 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I mean, even is huge.
Yeah, I've been paying attention. I watch a lot of like Street League, watch the Olympics, and contest skating for women's skating I think has been great because, you know, I actually like in some of the more recent events I've like been more interested in like the storylines of like Chloe Cavell versus Hayes Aleal, you know, Momiji Nishida, all these girls that are kind of like there's a pretty compelling like power struggle happening in that kind of scene. So, you know, if anybody's kind of like scoffs at like Street League, is like, I don't blame you. It's like it can be pretty boring, but I think you know, if you give it a chance, especially the girls competitions, there's some pretty interesting stuff that's been happening, and it's like the skill progression has been like explosive. And like just since I've been watching it over like the past 5 years, like it is like a really impressive and emerging scene. And you know, the only downside to that is I think if you could get some more of these girls to like see a point in skating street, then I think that could bridge the gap to get like, you know, more kind of core skaters to maybe give a shit about contest skating a little bit as well. But it's like, yeah, there's not that much money there, so I don't know if that'll happen. But yeah, I mean, basically just like just give it a chance if you haven't looked at it. You know, sometimes some contests suck, but some contests are really, really good. So yeah, check it out if you don't ever watch Street League.
I should add, because I've said so many things about how much people who don't skate hate contest skating and are bored by it, and like my colleagues aren't interested. The one spot where like in normie whatever journalism world there was a lot of excitement was women skateboarding in the Olympics street. Like that just really, that like people were coming up to me and talking about it and they were very excited by it. So it does seem like there are bright spots there and there are paths forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some context. Andrew's the U.S. Olympic coach, so he's the guy. I think his job is that when Jagger wants to do switchback Smith, he says, no, backside flip nose grind. It's going to be 9.2. Yeah.
All right, well, I'll just say one more thing before we wrap up, which is we all want to know what stories are not being covered in skateboarding that you all think should be written about. You know, slap only goes so far and has its limitations. If you guys in the audience think that there's something happening in skateboarding, local or national or international, whatever, that nobody's writing about and no one seems to care about, and you're talking to people and you're like, why doesn't anyone give a shit? Why won't anyone write about this? Approach me, approach us after the panel. Come talk to us tonight at the bar or whatever. I want to hear all of your story ideas. If you're a freelance writer and you want to write something, please talk to me as well. We want to know. We don't want to be in a, you know, whatever, like in an ivory tower or anything, just like writing about what we care about. Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, huge round of applause for this whole panel. And I also I want to give a huge shout out once again to New Balance, the best shoe brand in the world, who famously no one on this panel has ever criticized, not that I could think of. But yeah, thank you so much to Seb and the whole New Balance crew for letting us host this brutally honest conversation about the current state of skate media.